Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Discuss on 2021 SBE Webinar Series number 1. My name is Odeta Jevin Wijaya, a 2019 undergraduate student of Universitas Prasetya Mulia majoring in business, and I am your host this evening. It is such a great honor for our committee to have you here with us. Thank you so much for coming, and let me begin by giving you a warm welcome to Discuss on 2021 SBE Webinar Series number 1, Leading the People Towards National Resilience, Diplomacy, and Economy. Also, I, on behalf of committee, would welcome to Professor Dr. Jisman S. Simanjuntak, Rector of Universitas Prasetya Mulia, who will be giving executive notes. And to all speakers, Sir Antonius Agus Riono, faculty member of Universitas Prasetya Mulia and former Ambassador of Indonesia to Vatican City State and New Zealand. Sir Darmawan Prasodjo, author of the book Jokowi and the New Indonesia, a political biography, and Vice President Director of PT PLN. And also Sir Tim Hannigan, co-author of the book Jokowi and the New Indonesia, a political biography. Sir Edward Ghani Suryahudaya, researcher in the Department of Politics and Social Change at CSIS Indonesia. And also Mr. Andreas Toto Subagio, Director of Teachers Academy, Periplus Education. And all agencies from around the world who have Singapore, Qatar, Netherlands, Israel, Cambodia, and England. And also agencies from our media partner, Chakra TV. And for a brief information about today's event, so Discuss on 2021 SBE Webinar Series number 1 is a discussion forum to reunite practitioners, educational facilitators, and book authors to discuss the most current topics in business, economics, tourism, and other crucial industries. This is an annual webinar event that comes in several series, and what you're watching now is the first series. Before we enter today's discussion, everyone is kindly asked to abide to some regulations as noted on the screen. And here are the webinar regulations. First, all participants' microphones will be muted upon entering the Zoom meeting. Number 2, all participants are suggested to keep their cameras on. Please make sure to be properly dressed and to deliver a polite manner during the webinar. Number 3, all participants are expected to stay until the end of the webinar while maintaining orderly manner to ensure a conductive webinar. Number 4, all questions during the event can be directed through Q&A feature using this format. Your name / your institution's name / the questions is directed to / question that is asked. English or Indonesian language are both allowed in asking questions. Number 5, all participants are allowed to share their opinions during the Q&A session through the chat room. All opinions should be expressed with orderly manner. Number 6, e-certificates will only be awarded to participants who have completed their feedback forms. The feedback link will be distributed at the end of the Q&A session through the chat room. And all feedback forms are to be submitted by Friday, 5th of November 2021 at 23:59 Western Indonesia time. And this webinar is also airing live on Universitas Prasetya Mulia YouTube channel and Chakra TV. So if you happen to face any technical errors or problems in Zoom, you can still access this event through those live streams. But I do hope today's event will run smoothly. And before we start, let us lift our spirit and listen to Indonesia's national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Will everyone please kindly rise for the playing of the national anthem or take a position with your clenched right hand on for your chest. Thank you. Everyone is kindly asked to be seated. And to start off the event, let us welcome Mr. Andreas Toto Subagio, Director of Teachers Academy, Periplus Education, to give his opening speech. Sir Andreas Toto Subagio, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Mbak Odeta. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Well, good morning or even good evening, wherever you are now. On behalf of Periplus, please allow me to express our appreciation for the opportunity and honor to work with Prasetya Mulia University for this special event. Thank you so much. A couple years ago, Mas Darmawan Prasodjo asked us about the possibilities of publishing his new book, Jokowi Mewujudkan Mimpi Indonesia, for international audiences. In the discussion, however, we proposed that we have to rewrite the whole book to suit the international taste. And Mas Darmawan agreed. Thank you, Mas Darmawan. We are lucky that we had Tim Hannigan from the United Kingdom for this project. Tim is the author of A Brief History of Indonesia. Speedily, he executed the project as a co-author. Thank you so much, Tim, that we have this book. We tried our best to make the book as balanced as possible. On one hand, there must be some kind of personal touch. And Mas Darmawan is the man. He knows Jokowi personally. He knows very well the ethos behind most big decisions that the president has already made. On the other hand, there must be also some kind of objectivity. Being an academician himself and a non-Indonesian, Tim Hannigan is very well suited to maintain the neutrality of the book. And this book is very, very timely. As we all know, just last Sunday, On the closing ceremony of the G20 summit, President Jokowi received the G20 presidency from the Italian Prime Minister. More than before now, international communities really want to know better how Indonesia has been with Jokowi as its president. Statesmen, academicians, investors, as well as journalists will benefit from this book. I personally believe that with its personal touch as well as neutrality, the book Jokowi and the New Indonesia can meet such needs. So have a fruitful discussion this afternoon, critically examining the ideas as well as the accounts presented in the book. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Andreas Toto Subagio, for the warm welcome. We are so honored. And next, our main session will be led by our moderator, Ms. Teti Lubis, a faculty member of Universitas Prasetya Mulia. And before I invite her to join on stage, let me have a brief introduction about Ms. Teti Lubis. Ms. Teti Lubis is a faculty member of International Business Law, Universitas Prasetya Mulia. She had also taught ethics and law subjects in various universities, both in Indonesia and overseas, including UGM, Unair, Chitkara, Delhi University, India, and IMLI, Malta. Ms. Lubis is also an off-legal consult at EHP Law Firm. She is a law graduate from UGM, Yogyakarta, University College London, and Monash University, Melbourne. So please welcome our moderator for today's Discuss on SBE Webinar Series number 1, Leading the People Towards National Resilience, Diplomacy and Economy, Ms. Teti Lubis. Hi, Ms. Teti Lubis.
Hi, Odetta. Thank you so much for the gracious introduction.
Yes, wow, Ms. Teti Lubis, I'm so honored to have you here. You look so fresh, stunning, and so ready to lead the webinar, yeah, Miss? But first of all, how are you, Ms. Teti?
I'm very great. I'm very happy very honored to share the panel with these 4 excellent speakers.
Yes,
I cannot wait to start this webinar soon.
Yes, Miss. Me too. I can't wait to see. All right, so Ms. Teti Lubis, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Odetta. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, audience event discussion, SBE Webinar Series. I'm Teti Lubis, as been introduced by Odetta, our MC, and then I will lead and moderate the keynote speech session this evening. I'm very pleased to be here with you along with 4 respected personalities in their respective field as our speakers today. First, but foremostly, I want to thank you all, the participants, for your time and visiting our webinar. Now, I will ask one question to check if you can see and hear as well. So great, seems everything is good, and I hope everybody is also well and had vaccine. So in this lovely evening, we will discuss the topic which is also the theme of this webinar, leading the people towards national resilience, diplomacy, and economy, while correlating this topic to the book, Jokowi and the New Indonesia, a political biography. The objective of our talk this evening is merely to discuss the topic from our speakers' perspective and their respective expertise from diplomatic point of view and economic perspective. So this talk is not to evaluate nor review the content of the book. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speakers. First, we have, of course, Mr. Darmawan Prasodjo. Good afternoon, Mr. Darmawan.
Teti, it's nice to see you, Ba.
Nice to see you. I just heard that you are now in New Zealand.
in Switzerland.
Oh, Switzerland. So how's the weather there?
It's 3 degrees Celsius, and I took a 6 miles run this morning, so I enjoy the morning. It's a beautiful morning indeed.
I can see Switzerland is a beautiful country, so enjoy being there. Right, so Mr. Darmawan Prasodjo is the author of the book, Jokowi and the New Indonesian. I have the book already here also with me. In addition to his literary endeavor, Bapak Darmawan, I should call you Bapak instead, is the Vice President Director of State Electricity Enterprise or PT PLN Persero. Joining us also this evening, actually afternoon on his side, all the way from Europe, another one from Europe, our second speaker, Mr. Tim Hannigan. Hello, Mr. Tim Hannigan.
Hello, Tati.
Yes.
Nice to see you.
Yes, good morning there.
Good morning, yeah.
Where are you now, in Ireland or somewhere in the UK?
No, I'm in Ireland, and the weather is not so nice as Switzerland, I guess. It's kind of raining, so.
Right, so you are in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can hear from the accent. Okay, Mr. Hannigan. So our speakers, second speaker, Mr. Hannigan, he is the co-author of the book. And then we are also honored to have Mr. Antonius Agus Sriono with us this evening. He is currently a faculty member for a graduate program, Universitas Prasetya Mulia. Bapak Agus, good afternoon. Selamat siang, Bapak. Apa kabar?
Very good, good. And you?
Yes, very good too. As you can see from my face, glowing because of this weather. Indonesia is very much glowing by the sunshine.
Sure.
So, Bapak Agus is also a former ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia for Vatican City State from 2016 to 2020 and New Zealand 2010 to 2013. And last, but certainly not least, for sure, Mr. Edward Ghani Suryahudaya, a researcher in the Department of Politics and Social Change at CSIS Indonesia. He's also joining us today as our fourth speaker. Good afternoon, Bapak Edward. Are you somewhere in Europe or Indonesia? So I can salute you with the right time zone.
Good afternoon, Bu Teti. I'm still in Jakarta, though.
Okay, good afternoon. Selamat siang, Bapak Edward. Very nice to hear like some young voice, yeah? Okay, right. So our four speakers will share their views on how Indonesia's resilience is portrayed through the figure of the leaders. Also, we will listen to their insight on how Indonesia has successfully built strong network with other countries and what legacies are to be inherited to Indonesia's next generations. So at the end of the, I think like at the end of the keynote speech session, we will have a question and answer session. So it's already definite. But let me briefly explain how you can talk to us during the webinar. If you have any questions during the session, please type them into the chat box in your Zoom control panel so everyone knows where is that. I will bring them up during this Q&A session, and all participants, those who are attending through our Zoom link and YouTube streaming, you are all welcome to share your opinion or ask questions. Questions in English or in Indonesian, both welcome. And I'm very happy to inform you that several lucky questioners will be rewarded with giveaways, with books, which will be announced straight after the Q&A session ends. So now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our first keynote speaker, the author of the book, Jokowi and the New Indonesia. But beforehand, allow me to brief you on his impressive professional background. Bapak Darmawan Prasodjo, PhD, is currently the Chief Transformation Officer and the Vice President Director of PT PLN Persero. I got the CV here with me, with 15 plus years experience to include serving the Mr. Jokowi Widodo as Deputy Chief of Staff of the Presidential Staff Office for 5 years. Of a particular note, Mr. Joko Widodo trusted and assigned Bapak Darmawan to write the Bahasa Indonesia biography of Mr. Joko Widodo. Bapak Dr. Darmawan specializes in energy economy and responsible for high-level orchestrating as well as setting up strategies to control priority programs. He is a powerful force in the organization and uses his positive attitude and tireless energy to encourage others to work hard, innovate, and succeed. So where his personal philosophy is to serve for others and contribute to society. Very noble he is. Dr. Darmawan graduated from Texas A&M University, where he completed his bachelor degree with cum laude, master's and his doctoral degree prior to his selection by the government of Indonesia as one of the 20 brightest Indonesian students. Further, he completed his postdoctoral in Duke University, where he focused on natural resources and energy policy. Dr. Darmawan is inspired daily by his wife and their 4 children. And his free time, Bapak Darmawan likes to swim, run, or go for cycling. So ladies and gentlemen, my audience, please join me in welcoming Bapak Darmawan Prasodjo. Bapak Darmawan, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Ibu Teti. Thank you, everybody, distinguished panels, distinguished guests, distinguished speakers, and ladies and gentlemen. Maybe I'm going to speak a little bit of English and Indonesian because Bu Teti, I think 95% of the audience here actually Indonesian spoken. So,
correct, Bapak. That's why I call you Bapak also. Yes, please, Pak. We can mix it with Indonesia and in English. Welcome.
Yes. Cerita ini berawal di tahun 2013-2014. Pada saat itu saya ditugaskan untuk mendampingi Pak Jokowi. Dan saya masih ingat pada waktu kampanye kita naik pesawat dari Jakarta ke ujung Pandang, ke Makassar, kemudian ke Manado. Dan saya ditugasi untuk briefing beliau mengenai energi. Saya teringat betul itu duduknya di belakang, pesawatnya yaitulah swasta gitu ya, penerbangan swasta ekonomi di paling belakang. Kemudian beliau sudah ada 2 briefing beliau yang kelihatannya sangat kompleks banget. Kompleks banget. Berbicara mengenai makroekonomi, mengenai hubungan internasional, kebijakan dan lain-lain yang saya melihat, diskusinya menjadi sangat berat. Kemudian saya ditugaskan duduk di samping beliau, kemudian beliau itu tertidur gitu ya, kemudian bangun, tanya gini, Mas, kita mau ngobrol apa? Tentang energi, Pak. Itu. Terus beliau tanya, sulit ya Mas? Enggak, Pak. Gampang Pak, energi Pak. Kita mau ngobrol apa ya Mas? Kalau energi itu, monggo Pak, mau listrik, mau migas, mau pertambangan Pak. Bapak mau beli yang mana? Udah listrik aja Mas. Oke, kemudian listrik itu. Terus saya mau memaparkan begini, Pak. Di Indonesia itu listrik kita ini termasuk listrik yang termahal di dunia. Saya bilang itu. Oh iya Mas, kenapa? Ya banyak pakai BBM Pak, mahal Pak. Oh iya, mahal ya. Mahalnya itu berapa? Saya bilang 3.000 Pak per kWh. Terus beliau tanya, apakah ada yang bisa lebih murah? Oh enggak, beliau tanya gini, BBM itu dari mana? Kebanyakan diimpor Pak. Oh ya. Apakah ada opsi lebih baik Mas? Ada Mas. Ada Pak. Kita punya gas, kita punya energi baru terbarukan, kita punya juga batu bara Pak. Dan itu lebih murah Pak. Murahnya berapa Mas? Nah, kalau batu bara 600 Pak. Kalau gas itu sekitar 600, 900, kemudian kalau energi baru terbarukan ada itu. Terus beliau berpikir panjang gitu, melontarkan begini, Mas, kalau saya jadi presiden, yang mahal-mahal saya kurangi, yang murah-murah saya tambah. Itu pernyataan beliau. Kemudian beliau tertidur lagi. Setelah agak lama beliau bangun, kemudian mulailah beliau berbicara, Mas, kalau pakai gas, itu harganya berapa? Domestiknya itu berapa? Beliau tanya begitu. Saya paparkan. Kemudian juga beliau menanyakan mengenai energi baru terbarukan. Potensinya berapa, harganya berapa, bagaimana cara membangunnya, termasuk batu bara dan lain-lain. Dan kemudian kita sampai di Manado, disitulah beliau pertama kali memaparkan mengenai strategi energi. Dalam usia beliau itu pertama kali memaparkan itu. Setelah sekitar 15 tahun, kita berdiskusi. Pertama kali berdiskusi, mohon maaf ini kelihatannya ada room service yang mau datang nih sebentar. Saya mengenal beliau karena beliau langsung melontarkan banyak sekali ide-ide yang saya sendiri tidak terpikir. Misalnya beliau mengatakan gini, Mas, bagaimana kalau membangun pembangkit itu langsung di dekat dengan tambangnya? Tentu saja bisa mengurangi biaya kosnya. Saya bilang, Pak, itu namanya main mode, Pak. Itu biayanya bisa dikurangi, kira-kira begitu. Nah, disinilah perkenalan pertama kali, dan untuk itu saya selama 5 tahun bertugas sebagai deputi di kantor staf presiden yang membriefing beliau, baik itu mengenai energi, mengenai ekonomi, dan lain-lain. Nah, dalam proses itulah saya banyak sekali mendampingi beliau dalam pengambilan keputusan di rapat kabinet terbatas. Dan disinilah muncul karakternya beliau. Itu misalnya sebagai contoh, beliau melihat banyak daerah itu di tengah sumber daya alam yang luar biasa, kayanya rakyat kita miskin. Nah, beliau melontarnya begini, saya melihat ini ikannya banyak, tapi kok rakyatnya miskin. Karena apa? Misalnya, kok harga BBM itu Rp50.000 per liter? Bagaimana di tengah harga energi yang sangat tinggi, tentu saja membuat baik itu di situ itu kekayaan alamnya itu luar biasa, tetapi ada kemiskinan yang beliau sebut itu kemiskinan terstruktur. Tidak punya akses terhadap air bersih, tidak punya akses terhadap energi, tidak punya akses terhadap konektivitas, tidak punya akses terhadap pendidikan, dan lain-lain. Dan untuk itulah beliau selalu melontarkan, ini harus diselesaikan. Ini banyak sekali misalnya tempat-tempat pariwisata yang luar biasa, tetapi beliau datang ke sana, bandaranya kumuh. Landasan pacunya pendek sehingga tidak bisa didarati dengan pesawat, sehingga daerah itu menjadi tidak berkembang. Banyak juga daerah-daerah yang sebenarnya sumber daya alamnya itu luar biasa, tetapi tidak ada konektivitas. Nah, inilah yang beliau sebut dengan kemiskinan yang terstruktur. Makanya akses terhadap pendidikan itu dibuat, kemudian akses terhadap jalan itu yang kalau terisolasi itu dibuka, kemudian akses terhadap pelabuhan udara, akses terhadap air bersih, akses terhadap energi. Makanya suatu ketika itu saya bertemu dengan Menteri Energi dari zamannya Orde Baru, yaitu Pak Subroto, Profesor Subroto. Beliau melontarkan, Pak Jokowi itu adalah seorang presiden yang paling Pancasilais, yang sangat Pancasilais. Saya tanya, Prof, kenapa Prof? Loh Mas, saya ini Menteri Energi, kok nggak kepikir bahwa harga BBM yang mahal di daerah terpencil itu membuat mereka menjadi miskin secara terstruktur. Tapi Pak Jokowi kepikir, Mas. Nah, inilah yang membuat bahwa ada sila kelima, yaitu keadilan sosial bagi seluruh rakyat Indonesia. Beliau melontarkan, ya Mas, sila kelima keadilan sosial bagi seluruh rakyat Indonesia itu sudah ada, tapi dalam bentuk tulisan. Dan Pak Jokowi itu betul-betul mengoperasionalkan, bukan hanya dalam bentuk policy, tetapi juga dalam bentuk suatu operasional. Ini contoh. Beliau datang ke perbatasan. Misalnya di sini ada di Papua, ada di Skau. Itu Jayapura ke sana sedikit. Melihat bahwa beliau langsung mendapat laporan. Yang di Papua Nugininya itu perbatasannya bagus sekali. Di tempatnya Indonesia itu kumuh. Dan inilah di mana ini ternyata adalah halaman belakangnya Indonesia, di mana di situ titik-titik pertumbuhan itu terhenti, masyarakatnya itu sangat miskin, terbelakang, dan lain-lain. Dibangun ini menjadi suatu daerah, gedungnya megah, dibangun konektivitas jalan, dibangun pasar. Nah, sekarang apa yang terjadi di Skau di situ? Bahwa ekonomi berkembang sangat pesat. Ada perdagangan, ada pasar, pasarnya laku keras. Ada pangan, ada kerajinan, bahkan emas pun dagang. Dan siapa pembelinya? Pembelinya dari Papua Nugini. Dan ini tadinya itu daerah terisolasi, menjadi daerah titik-titik pertumbuhan ekonomi baru yang memberikan kemakmuran dan memberikan pride dan juga courage bagi rakyat Papua dan bangsa Indonesia. Dan di sini juga dibangun misalnya di Kalimantan Barat, di Entikong, di Badau, di Aruk, di NTT juga di Mota'ain, Motamasin, dan Wini. Sama ceritanya. Di Nusa Tenggara juga begitu. Dari Timor Leste sekarang mulai bergerak ke kita. Dan betul-betul ini menjadi titik-titik pertumbuhan ekonomi baru. Luar biasa. Beberapa waktu lalu kita itu menyaksikan PON yang ada di Papua. Kalau kita melihat kriteria objektifnya, ada pada waktu itu stadion tidak ada. Ada pada waktu itu misalnya perumahan untuk atlet tidak ada. Kolam renangnya tidak ada. Semuanya tidak ada fasilitas. Tetapi dalam hal itu Pak Jokowi punya keberanian mengambil keputusan bahwa PON diadakan di Papua. Dan disinilah kita melihat adanya suatu karakter yang penuh rasa dengan empati, tepos liro, bahwa pada rakyat yang memang masih terbelakang di sana. Dalam proses itu ada tantangan, dibangunlah wisma atletnya, dibangun stadion, dibangun lain-lain. Dan kita menyaksikan kemarin bahwa PON itu sukses berjalan dengan baik sekali. Dan ini tentu saja masalah teknis bisa kita selesaikan, masalah fasilitas kita selesaikan. Artinya apa? Papua itu menjadi bangsa yang maju. Keluarga kita yang maju juga. Nah, dalam proses ini juga dibangun itu jalan di Trans Papua, misalnya dari Jayapura ke Wamena, dari Sorong ke Manokwari. Dan di sana mulai bergeliat juga ekonomi yang mulai berkembang. Nah, disinilah kita melihat suatu karakter seorang pemimpin yang peduli. Seorang pemimpin yang betul-betul bukan hanya menghafal Pancasila, tetapi bagaimana betul-betul mengoperasionalkan dalam suatu policy dan juga operasional di lapangan. Nih, coba sebentar saya share sedikit. Ada.
Di Kampung Kuda saya 2 malam bermalam di sana. Tambah hari ini berarti sudah 1 hari 1 malam. Jadi kami minta itu tolong pemerintah daerah usahakan jalan ini tolong diperbaiki. Karena kita ini bawa naik bahan-bahan makanan, bahan-bahan pokok buat kebutuhan Kabupaten Boven. Kalau mobil-mobil kita tidak naik ke sana, masyarakat mau belanja di mana?
Itulah kenapa kita bangun Trans Papua. Itulah kenapa kita bangun Trans Kalimantan. Karena kita ingin saudara-saudara kita yang berada di Papua, yang berada di Kalimantan, juga menikmati. Karena dengan infrastruktur inilah kita ingin mempersatukan bangsa yang sangat besar ini.
1 malam, iya. Ini kayaknya tidak ada tanda-tanda ini kita bisa jalan ini. Ini jalanan rusak parah betul. Betul-betul penderitaan. Pemerintah harus perhatikan, aduh kasihan.
Kita di sini di Sumatera, di Jawa sudah menikmati bagusnya jalan, tapi coba jalan-jalan seperti ini. Di mana keadilan bagi seluruh rakyat Indonesia?
bagus, sudah tembus, sudah baik. Saya minta terima kasih.
Kalau jalan yang sudah dibangun, saya sudah akui.
Jadi tadi kita lihat bahwa tujuan Pak Jokowi itu bukan membangun infrastruktur, tapi memberikan kemakmuran bagi rakyat, di mana di situ ada kemiskinan secara terstruktur, makanya akses terhadap air bersih, akses terhadap jalan, akses terhadap pendidikan, dan lain-lain. Ini sebagai contoh. Kalau kita lihat itu di Sumatera, itu kekayaannya 10 kali lipat dibanding dengan kekayaan yang ada di Pulau Jawa. Tetapi ukuran ekonominya hanya seperempatnya. Penyebabnya apa? Karena aksesnya itu tidak ada. Banyak sekali kekayaan alam yang tidak bisa kemudian dimanfaatkan karena terisolasi. Nah, untuk itu dibangun misalnya Trans Sumatera itu sekitar 2.600 km. Nah, kalau kita melihat ya, Trans Sumatera itu beda dengan lintas Sumatera. Karena lintas Sumatera dengan Trans Sumatera itu jaraknya 70 km-an, 40 sampai 70 km. Artinya ini bukan untuk mengurai kemacetan seperti Trans Jawa. Trans Jawa dengan Jalan Nasional Pantura kan dekat itu. Nah, ini gunanya adalah membuka daerah-daerah yang tadinya terisolasi, daerah yang lahan tidur menjadi lahan produktif. Ini sebagai contoh. Saya sebagai Wadirut PLN itu kaget sekali bahwa pertumbuhan kebutuhan listrik yang tertinggi itu ada di Provinsi Lampung. Saya lihat lagi ternyata di mana itu di exit tol-nya. Artinya apa? Daerah-daerah yang tadinya itu lahan tidur yang tidak bisa dimanfaatkan dengan adanya konektivitas ini dari Bakahuni, Tebagi Besar, Kayu Agung, kemudian sampai ke Palembang, tembakan lagi ke Bengkulu, kemudian ada Pekanbaru ke Dumai, Pekanbaru juga ke Padang, kemudian sampai ke Medan, sampai ke Aceh. Itu banyak sekali investasi baru. Ini sebagai contoh peternakan yang paling hebat sekarang ada di Lampung. Yang di daerah di exit tol itu ada bakalan sapi dari Australia dibawa, kemudian di sana dibesarkan, kemudian ada perkebunan, ada itu yang tadinya nganggur, ini mulai terbangun. Nah, untuk itu memang kita melihat adanya titik-titik pertumbuhan ekonomi baru. Tetapi ini bukan hanya dalam jangka pendek. Kalau kita melihat pembangunan infrastruktur, tentu saja memerlukan juga jangka panjang. Nah, artinya apa? Bahwa di sini bahwa Presiden punya visi, yaitu bangsa ini bukan lagi hanya sebagai ekonomi yang berbasis pada konsumsi, tetapi juga menekankan ekonomi yang berbasis pada produktivitas. Kalau kita lihat misalnya di Pulau Jawa, kita beberapa tahun yang lalu itu kalau Lebaran itu masih ingat itu ada simpang Joman, di mana di situ ada kemacetan luar biasa. Sekarang sudah tidak ada lagi. Itu bayangkan Jalan Pantura itu dari tahun 1800 itu belum terbangun sampai kemudian Pak Jokowi itu masuk ke dalam sana. Kemudian mulai kita bangun dan disinilah kita melihat bahwa ada bottleneck, yaitu bagaimana konektivitas antar daerah itu menjadi salah satu bagaimana kendala untuk adanya titik-titik pertumbuhan ekonomi baru, dan ini mulai terbuka. Sekarang dari Jakarta sampai Semarang hanya 5 jam, kalau dulu bisa sampai 14-15 jam. Kemudian dari Pekanbaru ke Dumai yang tadinya itu 6 jam, saat ini hanya sekitar 2 jam. Artinya apa? Kita melihat bahwa biaya logistik menurun, kemudian juga pergerakan ekonomi juga semakin meningkat. Dan memang ini adalah tujuannya bukan adalah pembangunan infrastruktur, tetapi bagaimana dengan adanya suatu infrastruktur, akses terhadap pendidikan, akses terhadap energi yang lebih murah lagi, di sini ada BBM satu harga dan lain-lain, itu membuat pertumbuhan ekonomi yang jauh lebih mendalam lagi. Nah, dalam buku ini tentu saja kami mengupas, tentu saja ini kita hubungkan juga dengan karakternya beliau. Ini sebagai contoh di sini. Di awal dari pemerintahnya beliau, Pak Jokowi, beliau membuat kartu-kartu itu. Kalau masih ingat bantuan langsung tunai yang dulu, itu bahwa para penerima bantuan ini itu harus antri. Dan itu kalau tidak antri di hari hanya itu, mereka akan gagal menerima itu. Akibatnya antriannya sangat panjang, padahal ini yang menerima BLT itu adalah orang-orang tua. Nah, dari situ Pak Jokowi sangat simpel sekali. Saya ingin keluarga yang tidak mampu, yang harusnya menerima ini, menerima haknya dengan terhormat, tanpa antrian, tanpa kepanasan. Makanya dibuat kartu-kartu itu tadi. Jadi sebenarnya di balik itu tuh sangat simpel sekali, yaitu keinginannya dari Pak Presiden ini. Nah, di sanalah kemudian dibuat kartu-kartu. Makanya antrian yang dulu harus ngantri sekarang ditransfer. Tentu saja arahannya dari beliau adalah uangnya ini kan ada kartu Indonesia Pintar dan lain-lain itu, arahan beliau itu simpel. Tidak terlalu tinggi-tinggi, tidak terlalu muluk-muluk, tetapi tolong jangan dibelikan untuk merokok. Jangan diberikan pulsa. Tapi tolong dibelikan untuk seragam, dibeli untuk tas sekolah, kaos kaki, sepatu sekolah, kemudian buku sekolah dan lain-lain peralatan sekolah, yang artinya apa? Bahwa di sini begitu saya itu menjadi bagian dari tim inti di istana, kami melihat sisi humanisme dari beliau. Tidak rumit cara perumusan dari bagaimana merancang suatu desain pembangunan dari mata Pak Jokowi, karena memang upbringing-nya itu dari keluarga yang biasa-biasa saja, tinggal di pinggir sungai, sehingga mengerti betul bahwa misalnya orang yang sakit itu bukan sakit untuk karena sakitnya, tapi takut untuk bayarnya itu nanti nggak kuat. Jadi makanya ada Kartu Indonesia Sehat, ada BPJS, kemudian dananya ditambah dan lain-lain, karena beliau paham betul bahwa disinilah ini salah satunya adalah fondasinya adalah kesehatan, dan juga untuk pendidikan. Kartu Indonesia Pintar itu beliau paham betul dari keluarga yang tidak mampu, sehingga cara satu-satunya keluar dari kemiskinan ya harus melalui pendidikan. Dan beliau paham betul bahwa dari anak keluarga tidak mampu, walaupun uang sekolahnya itu sudah gratis, tapi kalau tidak bisa beli seragam, ke sekolahnya itu nyeker tidak pakai sepatu, ya tentu saja otomatis akan drop out karena dibully oleh teman-temannya. Makanya dibuatlah Kartu Indonesia Pintar dan lain-lain. Nah, dalam hal ini memang saya melihat suatu karakter yang memang di sini dengan tim itu. Tim, thank you so much Tim for the collaboration, between you and I. It's been very magnificent collaboration, dan itu juga di sana digambarkan juga bagaimana karakter dari Pak Jokowi. Nah, untuk itu kita review sedikit dalam buku itu, masa lalunya beliau dari masa kecilnya, dan kita melakukan literatur review yang sangat mendalam, kemudian dari keluarga, dan dari sana muncullah karakter-karakter yang tentu saja ada empati, tepos liro, roso pangroso, dan ini ternyata menjadi karakter pembangunan ini. Nah, overall this book, thank you so much for this opportunity. This book is not only about the development, but also emphasizing on how the character of Pak Jokowi affecting the design of the development itself. Kemudian juga di sini dari tim itu sangat ahli dalam politik juga, ditambahkan perjalanan politik Indonesia, sehingga buku ini semoga bisa menjadi salah satu-satunya biografi Pak Jokowi yang ditulis oleh tim dari Indonesia, karena yang satunya itu kelihatannya on the other side gitu ya. Nah, semoga ini bisa menjadi salah satu acuan dan semoga bermanfaat bagi semuanya. Dan dalam hal ini dipersilakan saja kalau nanti ada diskusi lebih lanjut, dan karena tim Mas Toto, I have 5,000 books, Mas. So right here maybe I can distribute much more. Tadinya hanya 10, mungkin kita tambah menjadi 50, kira-kira begitu. Dipersilakan Mbak Teti nanti diatur seperti apa. Pada intinya we sincerely appreciate itu dari Periplus team, and then also Tuttle Publishing, also Tim Hannigan. You are one of the best writer I've ever collaborate with, and your insight of this Indonesia is actually amazing. I think you know much more Indonesia than I do. Of course, I know Pak Jokowi better than you do, and then our collaboration is becoming a very good product. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bapak Darmawan. Bapak Darmawan, okay, I need you to stay with us. I have a few questions. Actually, there are more foreign, non-Indonesian participants following our talk today. So they would like to know, more about your book. So can you tell us, what is actually the philosophy behind of this Bapak Jokowi leadership?
Actually, the philosophical, the bottom line is shifting Indonesian economy from consumption-based economy to become production-based economy. That actually the tagline behind all of this design of the development. So, for instance, it's like this: how actually Pak Jokowi able to empower the people of Indonesia. And right now, the people of Indonesia is actually blessed with rich of natural resources. But why couldn't we utilize those natural resources into production? And he came to the area, for instance, there is a beautiful beaches over there, beautiful, underwater sea, etc., etc. But nobody came there. Nobody can use it as a tourist attraction. Why? There is no airport. There's no road reaching to the area. So simply, how we going to be able to utilize this? How we going to transform this area? This itulah lahan tidur gitu. Itu menjadi suatu yang produktif. Bagaimana caranya? Dan untuk itu ada airport. Oh, landasan pacunya kurang panjang. Oke, mari kita perpanjang. Bandaranya kumuh gitu. Mari kita perbaiki. Jalan ke sana nggak ada. Mari kita bangun. Di situ tidak ada hotel ya. Kita bangun amenities. We need some investment, of course. We need investment. We're not going to be able to do this alone. We need some kind of investment, domestic investment, international investment. The only way we're going to do this is through collaboration, domestic collaboration, international collaboration, international investment. We welcome all of those. So he understand that to ensure, and he understand about the GDP, gross domestic product. How the compute the domestic product consumption plus investment plus government spending minus tax plus export minus import. So now the GDP of Indonesia is $1 trillion. So when we talking about $15 billion, that's already $10 billion. That's already 1% of the economy. So if this year we are able to facilitate $10 billion investment, that means we add additional economic growth of 1%. So that's why he understands that building Indonesia, we're not going to be able to do this alone. To shift from consumption-based economy to production-based economy, we have to do it through collaboration, investment, empowerment, domestic collaboration, international collaboration. Makanya kalau Pak Jokowi itu keliling itu, please come to Indonesia, invest to Indonesia, karena memang filosofinya adalah bagaimana membangun suatu ekonomi yang berbasis pada produktivitas. Nah, untuk itu salah satunya adalah mau bangun pertambangan di situ nggak ada jalan, mau bangun di situ nggak ada pelabuhan, di situ nggak ada pendidikan, nggak ada air bersih, nggak ada energi dan lain-lain. Nah, untuk itulah memang kelihatannya Pak Jokowi ingin membangun infrastruktur. The real reason is that he want to give prosperity to the people, and building infrastructure is only a means exactly to do so. Gitu Pak Teti. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih. Thank you Bapak. So more actually question that I would like to dig out. So this is not question and answer session ya Bapak Darmawan. So hopefully you still patiently sit with us. So you said that the infrastructure development is not actually the goal of this President Jokowi, but actually there are more into the long term, because that will benefit to more aspect of life that give a better life to the society or to the people. Can you elaborate more on this?
So for instance, like in Lampung, Pak Jokowi is building a toll road from Sumatra, 2,600 kilometers, from Bakahuni, the port, to Tebanggi Besar, Kayu Agung, Palembang, and etc. etc. So we do analysis here, deep dive analysis, realizing all of those new economic growth is in the exit of the toll road. So we understand, there are new economic activities, but we're not going to be able to discuss this only in the short term, because when there is a exit, toll road exit, somebody coming from the provincial government has to connect this toll exit to the provincial road, and then to connect to the district road, connect to the village road, etc., etc. And we're going to discuss furthermore. Di situ ada potensi pariwisata, ada potensi ada kerajinan, ada potensi perkebunan. Dan ini perlu dijahit. We need to stage, we need to do a holistic approach. Somebody has to invest if they want to build a new farm, big, large-scale farm. Somebody has to invest if there is some kind of mining potential, transform the mining from resources to reserve to production. Mungkin ada undang-undang perda yang harus diubah, mungkin ada peraturan daerah yang harus diubah, mungkin perlu adanya suatu kolaborasi antara Bappenas dengan Bapeda dan lain-lain, mungkin perlu adanya juga perizinan yang lain. So Mbak Teti, building infrastructure is only a bridge.
Bapak Darmawan, so before we go to the next speaker, Can you describe in 3 words, because you have really like a good relations with Bapak Jokowi? Describe Bapak Jokowi as a person in 3 words, and describe Bapak Jokowi as a leader in 3 words.
As a person?
Yes.
Kind, caring, empathy.
Okay, kind, caring, and empathy. And then as a leader?
Strong will, wisdom. Kemudian satu lagi, luwes. Strong will.
Would you please say again, Bapak?
Luwes.
Okay.
Well adjusted. So
well adjusted.
Strong will, wise wisdom, and well adjusted.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Bapak Darmawan, for the very insightful presentation on Indonesian leadership through the figure of Bapak Jokowi. And I also thank you for the vivid glimpse about your book. I think the participants should read the book. So would like to know more about Bapak Jokowi from that perspective. Okay, so I see some have just joined our room today. For those who just joining us, welcome. Just a reminder for the participants, please be sure that you type the question into the chat box. It looks like we have few questions already. Thank you. Keep them coming. So we will go ahead to the next speaker. Now I would like to invite our second keynote speaker, Mr. Tim Hannigan, to deliver his insight. Mr. Hannigan is an academic and a writer who specializes in Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia, right? And he is the author of 3 books of narrative history, Mother in Hindu Kush, which was shortlisted for the Boardman Tasker Prize, Raffles and the British Invasion of Java, which won the 2013 John Brooks Award, and A Brief History of Indonesia. He also edited and expanded A Brief History of Bali, and then wrote A Gig in Indonesia. Very interesting books. So Mr. Hannigan has written travel features for newspapers and magazines in Asia, the Middle East, North America, and the UK. And he has contributed to various radio and television documentaries on Asian histories. He holds a PhD from University of Leicester. So works on travel writing and contemporary writing as an academic. That's why holding this PhD that forced him to teach at undergraduate and postgraduate level. His scholarly research has been published in various journals and edited collection. So Mr. Tim Hannigan, should I call you Tim instead?
Must Tim.
Yes, okay. The time is yours now.
Thank you, Teddy. I think I can share my screen, right? Maybe not. Yes. So I want to talk briefly, following on from Pak Darmawan's discussion of the themes that go into the book, the themes of Jokowi's political philosophy. I want to talk about the context in which the book itself is being presented, which is the perception, the international perception of Jokowi and also of Indonesia, and how we hope, Pak Darmawan and I, we hope we are making some positive contribution to some deficits there with this book. So Indonesia is the world's 4th largest country by population, the 3rd largest democracy. It's Southeast Asia's largest economy, home to well over 250 million people. It's a G20 nation and taking the G20 presidency next year. Clearly one of the big global players of the 21st century. But despite all of that, persistently, and particularly in the West, particularly in Europe, and particularly amongst English-speaking nations, Indonesia has always had a curious opacity. There are plenty of educated Europeans still who would struggle to place Indonesia on the map of the world, let alone to name any of its senior politicians. There are historical reasons for this. Reasons of geography, reasons of language. Unlike India, Pakistan, Malaysia, until very recently, Indonesia has not had a largely Anglophone middle class and has not mainly used English as its primary language of business and academia and politics. Indonesia, when it's seen from the outside world, then tends to be Indonesia translated, Indonesia mediated, and the same goes for the figure of the president. And this puts a peculiar pressure on the leader of the day in terms of global perceptions of Indonesia. The outside world tends to see Indonesia through the person of its president. And the president, whether they like it or not, ends up serving not only as a national leader, but as a symbolic manifestation of Indonesia for the outside world, for those Australians, Americans, Europeans, even Singaporeans who actually can find Indonesia on the map. Now, clearly, some past Indonesian presidents have self-consciously lent into this role. Sukarno, of course, was a great orator, as great an orator in Dutch and English as he was in Indonesian, and as powerfully, commandingly charismatic a presence in any international context as on the Dice and Pangam Merdeka on the 17th of August each year. And more recently, and in a very different style, SBE has the slick English, the cerebral qualities, and the ready affinity for the international conference circuit, the in-depth global news interview that allowed him very, very successfully to project Indonesia's image abroad, regardless of what was going on politically at home. Other presidents, somewhat less so. Suharto had no great international performance pedigree. To some degree, Megawati likewise, and certainly Jokowi. Now, this is by no means simply because he doesn't speak English as fluently as SBE. It's really worth pointing out that there are some world leaders, Angela Merkel and Vladimir Putin most famously, who choose never to speak English in public, despite the fact that they actually can do. But who are still able very effectively and deliberately to project an international image. No, the main point for Jokowi is that his own focus, and Darmawan has just explained it beautifully in his presentation, his main focus is where it should be, domestically, not with the perceptions of international journalists or foreign audiences, but in the domestic sphere, where the 270 million people he leads live, the people who have twice given him his mandate. And this is where all his priority policies and developmental goals lie. Darmawan explained them very, very clearly. So Jokowi isn't particularly concerned about, or hasn't been particularly concerned about, projecting his own image internationally. He's got more important things to worry about. When it comes to successfully handling Indonesia's international engagements, he has often, with that businessman's practicality that's always informed his modus operandi, successfully delegated. But this does leave his image, and with it Indonesia's, with that international opacity, somewhat closed to a foreign audience, a blank onto which foreign journalists and commentators can project whatever they want. And a case in point is the speech that Jokowi gave earlier this week at the COP26 meeting. It was an important speech and an important and pressing call to more developed nations. What are they going to do to assist Indonesia and countries like it in the fight against climate change? But it was naturally delivered in Bahasa Indonesia. It was reported internationally, but it wasn't liked and shared around the world, as was the speech of Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, which is a nation 1,000 times smaller by population than Indonesia. There are probably more people in Europe at the moment who could name Mia Mottley than could name Jokowi, which is a strange situation. So what this has tended to result in the years since 2014 is a series of reductive and even sometimes trite and even patronizing portrayals in the international media. International profiles of Jokowi, for want of something more concrete, tend to repeat the same handful of tropes and cliches about the president, some of which are misleading, some of which are downright accurate. And here are the most regularly seen ones in international articles, profiles, even books. Jokowi was born in a shack. Jokowi was raised in poverty. Jokowi is a former carpenter or sometimes a former furniture salesman. Jokowi is a heavy metal fan. Jokowi loves infrastructure. The first one is completely untrue, despite being repeated in dozens of articles in at least one book. He was born in the Rakyat Indonesia hospital in Surakarta in 1961. And he didn't grow up in a shack. His childhood homes were very modest, certainly by modern middle-class standards. They weren't shacks. And rather than growing up in poverty, he grew up in close proximity to poverty, close to poverty in his own social environment, but not necessarily really in poverty. And that's a really important distinction in terms of his life journey and also his philosophy, again, as Darmawan described. As for being a carpenter or a salesman, well, only in the same sense that Bill Gates is a computer repair guy. He was a skilled graduate and an entrepreneur who founded a very successful manufacturing and export business and was a wealthy man by the time he first ran for public office. He does love heavy metal. That is absolutely true. He's loved heavy metal since high school, but that doesn't necessarily best convey his character. The idea of a president berjiwa rockers doesn't really convey Jokowi's personality. I think if there was a rocker president, it was probably Sukarno before rock even existed. And as for the loves infrastructure line, it's sometimes mentioned in a patronizing manner by international journalists, with the image of Jokowi inaugurating a toll road or opening a bridge in mind, as if it were just a foible, as if a transformational infrastructure project was the same thing as a self-glorying statue in a city intersection. But as was again made very clearly in Darmawan's presentation, this isn't a foible. This isn't something that he just loves to do. This is a fundamental gateway to the structural change and the development that is the philosophical emphasis of the presidency. But these points get repeated over and over in international articles and profiles about modern Indonesia and its central policy. And then finally, there's one other thing that feeds into that, which is the legacy of the hyperbolic fervor generated around the 2014 election. Now, it was certainly a dramatic moment, but with hindsight, that hyperbole is easy to see. Indonesia's democracy has been very robust and has proven so over the last 20 years. It would unlikely have been seriously imperiled by an alternative outcome in 2014. But the overheated commentary primed that discourse of disappointment among some commentators, particularly international commentators, just as was the case for Barack Obama in the USA in 2008. It's a discourse that doesn't provide much space for clear-eyed and realistic review of Jokowi's record to date. So none of this particularly helps frame the president, his government, its policies in their proper domestic perspective for an international audience. And that was the impetus behind this book, particularly pressing in light of the upcoming G20 presidency. The outside world beyond Indonesia needs to be able to understand who Jokowi is and what Indonesia is better. So what we hope we're doing with the book is to give a clear glimpse in English for an international audience of Jokowi in his proper context. The context of the nation he actually leads, the context of his domestic policy priorities on structural reform, and perhaps to give a better sense to people in Europe, Australia, America, Singapore, of how Jokowi appears to 270 million Indonesians, rather than how he appears to a small handful of foreign correspondents. I was going to say something about the production of the book, but Pak Darmawan has already done that, so I will stop at that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the very short and then very vivid presentation, Mr. Hannigan. It's very interesting to have your view on Indonesian leadership through your view as a co-author of the book, as a journalist, and as a foreign academic. But interestingly, of course, I have questions, or before I move to the next speaker. What do you think, you as a journalist, and also as a foreign academia, the way of Bapak Jokowi leading the countries?
I think I would very much broadly agree with Pak Darmawan. I mean, I would say I have been led Darmawan's perspective on this as the person with the political insight. I, as a writer about Indonesia, am particularly interested in how Indonesia is perceived from the outside. So that's my kind of area of expertise and interest, and also the historical long view, how Jokowi fits into a historical narrative of Indonesia over the last seven decades or more, really. So I think there's always and this is what I was trying to talk about in the piece. There's always this tension between from the outside how Indonesia appears internationally and how Indonesia appears to Indonesia. And I think that was very well illustrated in the contrast between SBE and Jokowi. SBE had a very successful international profile. Indonesia had a very strong reputation on the international conference circuit because SBE was very good at that stuff. Things like the G20, despite the fact that there were problems at home, popular perceptions at home were maybe not so positive. It's that lack of awareness outside of perceptions within, and the lack of communication across that barrier is the interesting thing. Jokowi's position within Indonesia, his reputation, his popularity with we could say the normal people in Indonesia is pretty strong and remains pretty strong, but you wouldn't necessarily understand that from reading foreign news reports because they come through that tiny little filter.
Thank you, Tim. So one more question. Knowing that you have written a lot of books about Indonesia, so you know Indonesian culture very much and then very well. And then you know also the history and also all the regimes from the very first until now. So, but I would like to ask again about the Bapak Jokowi from your perspective, as per my question to Bapak Darmawan before. If I ask you to describe Bapak Jokowi in 3 words as a president, how you say about Bapak Jokowi?
First one is different, because he is materially different from every president who came before. In his social background, in his professional background. So different. Different has to be the first word. And I'm struggling to think of any other ones because that difference is so key to the sort of importance of Jokowi, the symbolic importance as much as anything. So different would be one. Communicative. And this is something, again, that I think is really lost in the international audience. Jokowi's speech doesn't translate particularly well into English. This was one of the problems we had with the book. It's difficult to convey that informal, warm style that he has in Indonesian. It doesn't come across very well in translation. So communicative, different, and one more. I have to say, unlucky, because any world leader who has found themselves as world leader in the time of coronavirus, it's completely out of their control, has to be considered unlucky. And there is a certain element of sadness around that the second term has begun with all the big plans, all the enormous plans slightly stalled by the world situation. So different, communicative, and in the context of coronavirus, unlucky, I guess.
Very interesting point of view. I mean, different, communicative, and unlucky. But unlucky now become lucky, knowing that the coronavirus cases in Indonesia are getting lower and lower.
Yeah,
thank you so much again.
But 1 year has been lost, unfortunately. So yeah, that's unlucky.
You're right, Tim. Okay, thank you so much again, Mr. Hannigan. So, participant, please, I remind you again, if you have questions or clarification about our speaker's talk, do not hesitate to type it into the chat box. So, because we shall get them right back after all the presentations. So next, I would like to invite our third speaker, Mr. Antonius Agusriono, to share his views on the book. Again, allow me to enjoy another proud moment, reading an impressive bio note of Bapak Antonius Agus Riono. Bapak Agus Riono is a graduate from International Relations Study Program, Universitas Gadjah Mada, dari sama-sama alma maternya Bapak. He has started his diplomatic career since 1984. He was appointed to be the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Republic of Indonesia to the Russian Federation from 2008 to 2010. Straight after, he was assigned to be the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the New Zealand from 2010 to 2013. And on 13 January 2016, Presiden Jokowi appointed Bapak Agus Riono to be the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Vatican City State. So currently, Bapak Agus Riono is a faculty member at Universitas Prasetya Mulia. Bapak Agus, now the floor is yours. We would like to hear your view from the diplomatic perspective. Please.
Thank you, Bu Teti. Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the organizer for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge and experience as a diplomat. Here, I would like also to extend my appreciation to Bapak Darmawan Prasodjo and also Mas Tim Hannigan as authors of the book entitled Jokowi and the New Indonesia. As you might all aware that the general topic of today's discussion is leading the people towards Indonesia national resilience, diplomacy, and economy. But I have to remember that since the organizer asked me to share my experience on diplomacy, not reviewing the book, I have therefore chosen the title Empowering Indonesia National Resilience Through Soft Power Diplomacy as the title of my presentations. So I will not directly touch upon the book itself, although I will quote one page of the book. Dear colleagues and participants, in general, next please. In general, diplomacy is the main instrument of foreign policy. Therefore, in this presentation, I would like to combine between theoretical approach and practical approach, in practical approach, I would like to mention about 6 components. There are diplomacy, foreign policy, national interest, national resilience, soft power diplomacy, and diplomat itself. So those are 6 components of theoretical approach that I want to share with you this afternoon. On the other side of the coin, I would like to share with you about the practical things that I had during my assignment as ambassador in the Holy See, so Holy See of Vatican. My presentation will focus on how soft power diplomacy had been implemented to empower national resilience as one of our national interests based on my personal experience as a diplomat. So this is the main focus of my presentation. I would like to quote Anthony Eden. He says that a diplomat is one who lessens tensions and promotes understanding. So the keywords are lessen tension, and promote understanding. To lessen tension and promote understanding, a diplomat should use soft power as an instrument to achieve his goals. And according to Joseph Nye, soft power is the ability to attract and persuade. So the ability to attract and persuade is one of the important tasks of a diplomat. Dear colleagues, to begin my presentation, allow me to quote an excerpt from the book entitled Jokowi and the New Indonesia, especially on page 204. According to Christopher Hill's formulation, foreign policy is the hang of domestic and international politics, the point at which internal and external impetuses intersect and determine a course of action. These are the words from Christopher Hills. Okay, so next. I will try to relate the idea of soft power diplomacy with the situation in Indonesia. We are all aware that volatility of Indonesian national unity. No, I'm talking about the unity of Indonesia, considering that Indonesia is one of the most pluralistic countries in the world in terms of ethnicity, culture, beliefs, and local languages. So we are among the pluralistic countries in the world. To maintain its survival as pluralistic nation, the national resilience of Indonesia should be empowered by national unity. So national unity is very important and one of the national interests of Indonesia. Here in Indonesia, there are diversity in terms of religion, ethnicity, race, etc. On one hand, most countries appreciate the ability of Indonesia as a nation state to manage its national unity, but on the other hand, there have been concerns about facing the possibility of division and disunity of our country. So once again, I just would like to emphasize that most of other countries always appreciate the capability of Indonesia to ensure to empower the unity in diversity, but on the other side of the coin, there are also we are also facing possibility of division and diversity, disunity in Indonesia. That is our challenge. In relation to the previous assignment as the Indonesian ambassador to the Holy See in Vatican, let me give you two examples of the implementation of soft power diplomacy as a means to achieve one of our national interests, namely maintaining religious harmony for the sake of safeguarding unity in diversity. And first activities is an interfaith dialogue of the Indonesian diaspora in Europe. That is very important because we invite all diaspora in Europe to come to Vatican to make interfaith dialogue. And secondly, constructing a replica of Borobudur Temple in the Vatican Museum. So there are two examples of the implementation of soft power diplomacy. I just would like to mention here that my main mission as the Indonesian ambassador to the Holy See was to promote friendly relations among religious followers in Indonesia through bilateral relations with the Holy See in the field of political, social, and cultural affairs. So that was my main mission. Now I will start with the one example of the implementation of soft power diplomacy. On the 30th of June to 1 July 2018, I invited 46 Indonesian diaspora from different religious backgrounds who lived in 23 countries in Europe to come to Vatican to participate in the interfaith dialogue. The objective of the dialogue was to create mutual understanding among different religious followers, and that is very important objective, nurturing harmony among religious believers in Indonesia. As you might be aware, in terms of religions, for instance, Indonesia's population consists of 207 million Muslims, 73 million Christian or Catholics, and also 4 million Hindus, 1.7 Buddhists, and others. Those are the facts that we have now in Indonesia. And then in the interfaith dialogue that we organized in Vatican was also attended by senior representatives to the Holy See and also representatives of the Indonesian Religious Assembly representing Islam, Protestant, Catholics, Hindus, Buddhists, and also Confucianists. So those are many religions in Indonesia. So next. So this is the function of soft power diplomacy that I implemented during my assignment in Vatican 2-3 years ago. After 2 days of meetings on the 1st of July 2018, all participants agreed to issue a declaration called the Rome Declaration, which consists of 8 points. However, due to the limitation of time, I just would like to highlight 3 important points. Maybe next. Yes, this is the photographs of the Rome Declaration, where about 20 or 46 participants, Indonesian diaspora in Europe, attended this interfaith dialogue, and they declare the Rome Declaration. And I just would like to mention 3 important points. Number 1, plurality on religions, races, cultures, and languages in Indonesia is the gift of Almighty God for the Indonesian people and an inevitable fact that should be maintained, guarded, and developed together. So the key word is the gift of Almighty God. So plurality is the gift of Almighty God. Second, the unitary of Indonesia, which is based on Pancasila and also Constitution of 1945. It was also mentioned by my colleague, Pak Darmawan Prasodjo, when he mentioned about the values of our president, is a common home. So the unitary state of the Republic of Indonesia is a common home for all Indonesian people, guided by the spirit of unity and in diversity. And third point, tolerance within multiculturalism of the Indonesian society should become a pride factor So plurality should become a pride factor, and at the same time is a responsibility, since living harmoniously in Indonesia has become a reference for the international communities. That was my experience during my assignment in 6 countries. So in Indonesia, plurality, multiculturalism has become a reference for international communities. So on the next day, the Indonesian representation then submit the Rome Declaration, here the photographs, to His Holiness Pope Francis through Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Secretary of State. The Secretary of State at the time fully appreciated this effort by the Indonesian community to produce such important documents. So if you want to read the essence of the articles about the Rome Declaration, you can access to our book called Diplomasi, Kiprah Diplomat Indonesia di Luar Negeri, published by Gramedia. Another example of the implementation of Indonesia's soft power diplomacy, that is number 2, is by constructing Borobudur Garden in the Vatican's Ethnological Museum, or in Italian we call it Anima Mundi. Here, a replica of Borobudur Temple was built in 2017, with the government of Indonesia contributing around 7 billion rupiah for this historical project. 7 billion rupiah contributed by the Indonesian government. Every year, just for your information, more than 7 million people of the museum visitors get the chance to see Borobudur Garden or Borobudur Temple in the museum. By having a miniature of Borobudur Temple in Vatican, we would like to send a message to the world. What is the message? The message is here. As a country with world's largest Muslim population, Indonesia is proud to construct a miniature of the world's largest Buddhist temple at the center of world's Catholic faith. So Buddhist temple and then Catholic faith in Vatican, contributed by Indonesia with world's largest Muslim population. Dear participants, I just now would like to make conclusion. There are 2 conclusions that I would like to share with you. Oh yeah, this is the Borobudur Garden in Vatican Museum, in which Pope Francis had the opportunity also to visit the Borobudur Garden that we built in 2017. Now let me make a conclusion. Conclusion number 1, it is our hope that Rome Declaration as a product of soft power diplomacy will become reference to all religious followers in Indonesia, so that our national interest in maintaining the principle of unity in diversity could be materialized for the sake of our national resilience. In addition, the Rome Declaration is also a reflection of the spirit of Indonesian nationalism, which is another important pillar that reinforces our nation diversity. Last but not least, the conclusion is Indonesia's vast diversity is therefore both a blessing and a challenge. Above all else, it is a reality that we must continue to embrace and nurture all the international arena. Soft power diplomacy has proven to be an effective tool to both our national interests abroad as well as to strengthen effort in promoting national resilience at the national level. These are my presentation by combining the practical and theoretical approaches. I thank you very much, and I hope that you enjoy my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
What a very insightful presentation on diplomacy, Bapak Agus. Thank you so much for your thorough talk on leading the people towards Indonesia national resilience from the view of a diplomat. I actually have several questions, but due to time constraint, the committee asked me to go for the next speaker, but let us make it quick. I know you have a personal and then professional encounter with Bapak Jokowi, but I would like I would like you to give us in the very short sentence, or maybe in 3 words, how you depict Bapak Jokowi's diplomacy strategy.
Should I reply?
So, Bapak Agus, so we would like to know how you picture or describe Bapak Jokowi's diplomacy strategy in a short words or in 3 words.
One thing that I would like to mention here is the importance of protecting Indonesian citizens abroad. So there are many functions or many tasks that we have to do, but one thing that I have to remember about the instruction of Bapak Joko Widodo, Presiden Jokowi, that all diplomats should protect the Indonesian citizens abroad. That is the main important, and we as diplomats appreciate very well, and we have done our best to protect our citizens abroad. That is the most important thing that I could recall about our beloved President Bapak Joko Widodo.
Thank you so much, Bapak Agus. All right, participants, audience events discussion, SBE Webinar Series. After we have briefed the topic from diplomatic point of view, we are now welcoming Bapak Edward Ghani as our fourth speaker to discuss about our topic this evening from the perspective of economies. Mr. Edward Ghani, Bapak Edward, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Bu Teti?
Very good,
nice
Bapak.
to meet you.
So Bapak Edward Ghani is currently a public policy researcher and editor-in-chief analyst for Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS. Before, he was a political expert for Toyota Motor Manufacturing Indonesia, Jakarta, and director of Atmajaya Institute of Public Policy. He did his undergraduate degree in political science in University of Indonesia and master degree in political science and political economy in London School of Economics and Political Science, LSE London. He is actively writing an opinion in Jakarta Post. You may be familiar with his name. And then his scholarly research has been published in various journals. Bapak Edward, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Bu Teti. Very good afternoon to the distinguished speakers, as well as those of you who have joined online. First of all, I would like to thank Universitas Prasetya Mulia for the invitation to be one of the panels in today's discussion. It's an honor for me to share the panels with these excellent speakers. And in the next 15 minutes, I will try to add some things that the previous speaker may not have discussed, and there may also be repetition in one way or another. First of all, I would also like to congratulate Pak Darmawan Prasodjo and Mr. Tim Hannigan for the publication of the book. And I think it is an interesting book because it is written by someone who worked closely with the president and has witnessed some of his achievements in close observations. And I have read the book that is sent to me by the organizer of this event, and I have read especially the epilogue chapter, which I would like to put as a starting point of my presentation. The chapter stated that the second period of Jokowi is planned to focus on the human capital of Indonesia, and having previously focused more on the infrastructure in the first period. But of course, the pandemic halted some plans that had been arranged by the government. But for me, it is still important to keep talking about the human development at this time, especially with the extraordinary impact, right, of the pandemic on our everyday life. So for this reason, I prepared my presentation with the intention of focusing more on the younger generation, which in the future, I believe, is the focus and the strength also for the Indonesian human capital. For the participants and also for the speakers, some of my slides might seem to be critical, but I think it is a good avenue for us to stress out some problems so we can prepare ourselves in an appropriate manner, or perhaps it could be also an insight for the next book for Mr. Tim and also for Pak Darmawan. Okay, next slide, please. I will start my presentation by discussing some of the global trends that I feel are important for all of us to follow. And of course, these trends may be closely related to the various challenges that will be faced by Indonesia in the future. Next slide. Of course, no country in the world can be said to be completely prepared to face a pandemic, right? Like, however, that does not mean that there are no scientific studies that have tried to warn us of this danger. And we also often underestimate the views of the experts and do not take into account, or maybe do not take enough time to invest more in the development for the longer term. So hence, often we hear the word like lessons learned, right? Like some academics really like to take these words as the title of their article, right? Like every time we face a crisis or a disaster, like lesson learned from this, lesson learned from that, right? But do we really learn from our disasters? But perhaps it is more appropriate to call some situations that we face as lesson lost, right? This is a simple reflective question that I tried to raise at the start of my presentation, right? So the picture in this slide is the World Economic Forum report that was published in 2021. And I will try to briefly discuss some of the key points of the report. Next slide, please. So the report divides the global risk into three levels, namely the short term, the medium term, and the long term. And there are 5 risk categories, namely the economic, the environmental, the geopolitical, the societal, and the technological risks. For the short-term risks, or for now up to the next 2 years, the societal issues become the most dominant as the threats for the global community. And infectious disease answered by the respondents of the survey as the most threatening things to the world, especially with the COVID-19 variant which is still growing with the names, right? And the number 2, still in the societal dimension with the color red, is the livelihood crisis. But for me, the interesting part of this short-term risk is that the extreme weather is ranked in the 3rd position. And from my understanding, this issue for us in Indonesia has not received careful attention so far. And the placement of this extreme weather in the 3rd position shows that the danger of the climate change have been felt even now and have been more and more worrying. Next slide. In the medium term, threats are dominated by economic and financial issues. So the simple explanation is that what we do to address the short-term problems will have financial risks in the medium term. So there is a price to be paid in helping people get through times of crisis, like in the COVID-19 crisis. The second position for medium-term risk is occupied by the IT infrastructure breakdown. For me, it is common and it makes sense because during the pandemic, we are all forced and encouraged to digitalize various aspects of our lives. So such a fast process makes the digital infrastructure that we build nowadays so vulnerable to cyber attacks. And this vulnerability seems to have started and to be felt even now. So countries, from what I believe, that do not have a good digital or even data infrastructure will be very vulnerable to cyber attacks. And unfortunately, I'm saying, Our country, Indonesia, I believe, is still one of these countries. Next slide. And for the longer term, the geopolitical issues become the dominant variables. And even though it is still categorized as a long-term threat, I believe we should be monitoring them as early as possible. And not only that, the environmental impact, namely the biodiversity loss, also ranks at the top of the risk that we will feel or will face in the next 5 to 10 years. Next slide. And this report also shows that in terms of the level of impact and also the possibility of occurrence, the environmental threats are very dominant. As we can see from my slide, the green dots or the green scatter plots gather around the top right corner of the graph, right? So it is normal for me that the global agenda in overcoming the climate crisis will increasingly gain a place in the world community, right? Next. And currently, there has been an economic recovery in several major countries in the world. And Indonesia, from my understanding, has also experienced a slight economic recovery, right? But however, there is a fact that in the global economic recovery, we're moving towards what the experts call as the K-shape recovery. This means that there will be a winning countries and there will be a losers. And this is due to the unequal access to vaccination between regions and countries. And as we understand it, the vaccines are the key to us to getting out of the pandemic. But unfortunately, the access to vaccination is still very limited for certain countries. And rich countries enjoy greater access to vaccination. And meanwhile, emerging markets and of course the poor countries are still very vulnerable. And this is shown by the graph and also on the slide that not only vaccines, the fiscal capacity between countries in providing assistance to the community during the pandemic is also scarce. And advanced economies still have a relatively longer time to provide assistance to their people. And meanwhile, countries in emerging markets are increasingly limited in their capabilities, right? So this graph clearly shows how developed countries still have the power to set their fiscal funds, right, to help overcome the COVID-19 pandemic, while even the emerging markets have the very minimum capacity, even in 2022. Next slide. Meanwhile, I think it's important for Prasodjo University also. There are important issues that deserve our collective attention. The pandemic will potentially lead to the emergence of a lost generation in various countries. And Indonesia, I believe, is no exception. The reason is the limited access to online education due to economic inequality and digital inequality. Like online schools are deemed unable to provide quality in output for students, especially if the access to the internet is still unequal between regions. And young people are afraid to face anxiety because of uncertain situations. And the current situation also has the potential to have a negative impact on the mental health of the younger generation. Those who have just graduated from college, for example, have to deal with increasingly limited job opportunities due to the economic crisis currently being faced by many countries. And talking about the legacy on human capital, this generation called the pandemials, I believe, deserve more attention from the government and from us. Next slide. Based on these global trends, now I want to shift my focus to Indonesia. Especially, I want to take into account about Indonesia's young generation. And I will try to look at the various global issues and try to contextualize them with Indonesian conditions. Next slide. So Indonesian politics, from my perspective, in the future, will be very interesting. Why? Not only because there will be a new president in 2024, but also because the voters will be dominated by young voters. Millennials, as well as the Generation Z, will account for 60% of the total voters in 2024. And of course, this proportion is very, very large and will be able, from my understanding, to determine the direction of the Indonesian politics in the future. So it is very important for us to better understand the problems that will be faced by young Indonesians in the future. And the state, the government, and the political parties cannot view the younger generation as merely as voters. And it is necessary to better address the pressing needs of the younger generation. And the generation, I believe, has a much more different perspective from the older generation. And the way we see the world will greatly influence what kind of policies that will be supported by them, by us, right? And this generation also has a much better education with access to such broad information. So basically, they are a politically literate generation. However, their political awareness can actually turn to distrust of the state if they do not get political accommodation from the elites. Next slide. So this is the result of a recent survey conducted by Indicator. Yeah? So they asked the level of concern of young voters on several social, political, and economic issues. And from the survey, it was found that corruption is at the top of the list as the issue of greatest concern to the younger generation. And interestingly, in second place is the issue of environmental degradation, which is closely related to climate change, right? This finding is, for me, is consistent with the global risk perception that I mentioned earlier in my presentation. Health issue also attract them to be in the top 3 positions. So what can be drawn from this finding is that the younger generation of Indonesia is currently paying more attention to issues that may not have been the priority of previous generations. Next slide. I will try to faster in my presentation. So related to the various issues mentioned earlier, Indonesia is gaining momentum for me to prove its commitment to the world as well as to its own people. Indonesia raised the big theme in the G-20 presidency called the Recover Together, Recover Stronger. And the theme is very relevant for me and right on target when we look at the current global situation nowadays. And issues related to vaccine distribution as the key towards economic recovery must be an advocacy priority. Next slide. So returning to the issue of the younger generation, Indonesia is still experiencing the problem of a high unemployment rate among the young workforce. And in fact, it is one of the highest in Southeast Asia. Yeah? And the problem of mismatch is still an obstacle in the current Indonesian labor market. And the pandemic, I believe, also limited employment opportunities, forcing young people to compete with the older generation. Next slide. And the trick is to listen seriously to the aspirations of the young voters. I believe that's all that I want to talk in my presentation. So back to you, Bu Teti.
Thank you very much, Bapak Edward or Mas Edward. It's interesting to know how a young generation speak about Bapak Jokowi's perspective, and then your very insightful presentation on how actually the pandemic affect the young generation. That is very interesting to know, and that have to be dig out more. However, due to the time limitation, I have actually several questions, but can I conclude it into a very short, so you can make a very quick summary, same as a question that I asked to the previous speakers. What do you say about Jokowi leadership from your perspective from this, a young generation or from the millennial generation? I understand that you are from that, age group.
Yes, for me, Pak Jokowi, first of all, is a politician, right? And he's a popular politician even for the young generation. And hence, the young generation has put a high expectation of this politician. That's why there's some controversies, debate, which is quite normal for me because democracy is noisy, right? So it's normal. And the second part that I think Jokowi must be represented by the word of development, because he always tried to promote and encourage development, which is very important for Indonesia, especially for the infrastructure development. And the third is a unique. The word unique, I think, is more appropriate for Jokowi because he's not, he wasn't from the elite structure of the history of Indonesian politics, right? He was a new politician. He was a new man in the very vast political arena in Indonesia, but he could actually do something that we might not really expect before. And I think it's a very hard task for the future president to follow him and to continue the contribution for the country. I think that's what I'm talking.
Thank you, Edward. I think we should move right along for the next speaker. So we now have, actually this is extra, Ms. Hadijah Alaidrus, Content Manager of Business Indonesia Group.
Yes.
Ms. Hadijah Alaidrus, how are you?
I'm good, Ibu Teti. Thank you so much.
Very
how are
good
you?
to hear that you are good. So Ms. Alaidrus will now add up a note from media perspective to this evening discussion.
Yes.
Are you ready, Bu Hadijah?
I'm so ready.
Sorry a bit, like, you know, I mean, like a quick now, because
yes,
like,
I can make
we
it
have
quick.
to finish in a few, not in a few minutes, like in 15 minutes.
Yeah,
so Ms.
perfect.
Hadijah, the time and floor are now yours.
Thank you, Ibu Teti. Good afternoon, honorable speakers and guests. First of all, I want to thank Prasetya Mulia University and Periplus for inviting me. I'm honored to be able to share my perspective in this webinar. However, before I'm moving forward, please allow me a little bit to share my viewpoint on this political biography that is amazingly written by Pak Darmawan with the assistance of Mas Tim or Mr. Hannigan. Nothing to argue that both of them have done a wonderful collaboration in this political biography, Jokowi and the New Indonesia. Unlike any other biography, I can say this one unlike any other biography I've ever read about President Jokowi, this biography actually helps me to understand the roots of Joko Widodo, how a businessman can turn into a great and genius leader, as said by Professor Mahbubani. This roots and his childhood and his journey as a businessman has shaped his leadership, his political style, and his model of good governance as a president. And it's such an experience finding these facts on this biography. After reading and listening, of course, all the speakers in this webinar, it all makes sense for me now that, okay, why President Jokowi puts his agenda on universal healthcare coverage, education system, and he even prioritized the development in remote areas, the frontier, the outermost, and the underdeveloped areas across the country. Well, it is all because he aimed at creating fair development, and he wants the next generation to get better infrastructures and access to electricity and internet as well. As with this asset, we can strengthen our economy. And I took note on his background. I found that Pak Jokowi is very close to small people, or what Javanese often call as a wong cilik, the poor and the low-income community that he met and he know very well back then when he grew in Kalianyar. And from this, I can understand that all of his public policies are formulated based on his experience when he lived closely with the with this society. And I can say that his development agenda is a fundamental structure to sustain Indonesia's goal in becoming higher income country in the future. And of course, I believe we cannot reach the higher GDP growth or higher income per capita before we lower down poverty rate and the Gini ratio. And the goal only can be done by providing basic standard living for Indonesia, and including education, health, and hard infrastructures as well. And I believe President Jokowi knows this very well since his first day. That is why he is eager to build eastern part of Indonesia, including Papua, Papua Barat, provinces that have been unnoticed for such a long time. And today we see that Papua and Maluku during the stressful time managed to book higher growth of economy, passing the growth in Java even. BPS recorded Papua and Maluku grow by 9.15% in this third quarter. And it means that there is a hope to end poverty in those areas. And also as mentioned by Pak Darmawan before, ending poverty is Pak Jokowi's main agenda or main goal. And Pak Jokowi also did a lot of breakthrough, from one price policy for fuels, Kartu Indonesia Pintar, Kartu Indonesia Sehat, and it's all done in his first term. And he also put strong foundation for Indonesia as a big nation. We can see his commitment to Nawacita and even in vision of Indonesia 2045. Somehow his breakthroughs do not end after he finishes first term, as he know in the second term, he keeps doing it. His breakthroughs in omnibus law, Kartu Prakerja, have given him spotlight from international community. Those are also milestones in President Jokowi governance. And all of this have proven that he's not only focused in building toll road and airports, as he preparing something bigger than that, as also mentioned by Darmawan before. And another interesting part that I want to highlight about President Jokowi is his foreign policies and his strategies in international relations. I found that Pak Jokowi's profile and diplomatic approach are very effective. He doesn't seem pushing his approach too much, yet he easily gain attention and respect from many national and global institutional leaders, because his goal is clear. The diplomacy carried by his administration is intended to maintain national security in terms of sovereignty and economy. Yes, it is true that all diplomatic relations must be benefit for Indonesian people first. And quoting Pak Darmawan, President even has to travel to many countries to promote investors, because he believed that investment is the key to be a productive economy. And before I end my speech, I want to highlight this. During the pandemic or health crisis, I have to admit that President Jokowi and his cabinet has shown great commitment, especially in prioritizing people's health. The response of President in handling the public health and also the economy was a crucial point at that time. In this matter, his administration has proved it by reallocating state budget and launching social security net, as well as incentives for small medium enterprises and for the affected sectors under the big scheme called National Recovery Program, or we call it PAN, where the government had actually allocated billions of rupiah to handle this pandemic, while balancing the economy and public health. There is so-called strategy that I always remember said by President Jokowi, gas and rem, or gas and brake in English, where he carefully measured the time to open up economic when is the right time to open up economic sector, and when is in the other side, also maintaining the COVID number, and then he also expanding health facilities as well as pushing the vaccination program to the community. Turns out it is works in pressing down COVID-19 infection in the middle of 2021. And thank God, during the toughest time, when the second wave hit Indonesia, our economy managed to grow even in a positive trajectory. It's around 3.5% in this third quarter. Yes, it is a slowdown when compared to the previous quarter, 7.07. But I believe we may want to look to the export growth. It is very amazing. The number is very ensuring that the manufacturing sector has contributed a lot in this third quarter. And it means fundamentally Indonesia has a healthy economy, and now the number of infections has come down. So I believe the next thing that we want is keeping the recovery right on track. And I believe that President Jokowi will keep pushing his target, which is vaccinating 70% populations of Indonesia. And if it can be achieved at the end of this year, hopefully we can see an economic rebound next year. And that's all from me. I hope we can have a fruitful discussion next. And I thank you all very much. And back to you, Ibu Teti. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ibu Hadijah, for a very interesting notes from media point of view that comprehend our discussion this evening.
Yes.
So participants, it's time for me now to wrap this up. Before, let me read the main takeaways from our webinar. Actually, there are many salient details, as every single sentence said during the talk entails its importance. However, I need to conclude from all the speakers that we have today. It shows that how resilient and strong our nation from the portrait and the picture of our leaders, how strong our diplomatic relations have been built through soft diplomacy, and then how our economy is still resistant despite the various challenges faced by current governmental administration, such as COVID and also natural disasters. So now we are entering the question and answer session as the continuation of our talk today. And we already received quite many questions here, but we sorted out the most eligible question to be forwarded to our speakers. So let us dive into the first one. Yes, it's very clear. This question is to Bapak Darmawan, is addressed to Bapak Darmawan. Bapak Darmawan, I think you can see and then read the question on the screen. Is that clear, Bapak Darmawan? Yes.
Yes,
I will read that. In measuring the success of a leader, it's not only seen from the achievement, impact, and influence during his term of office, but also from the legacy and wisdom that he has given to the nation and state after he left his term of office. What are your thoughts on the regeneration of positive impact that Bapak Jokowi has on Indonesia in order to ensure Indonesian national resilience in diplomacy and economy will continue on for many years to come? This is a question from our student, Graciela Shelley. Please, Bapak Darmawan.
Thank you, Bu Teti. Pak Edward Ghani already laid the foundation of this, Bu Teti. And Mas Ghani presented the future risks that Indonesia is facing today. For instance, like today, we have to be mindful about the challenge of global climate change, sea level rising, the temperature is also rising, and hence in the COP26, President Jokowi already laid a new strategy. Before it was backward looking, now it's forward looking, announcing that Indonesia is going to having a new program, what we call carbon neutral by 2060. You know, I'm coming from the power and utility, the electricity sector. Right now, we are releasing the new national electricity planning, the greenest of all. 51% of the additional capacity is coming from renewable energy, and even thinking or planning additional coal-fired power plants is already banned. It's not in the agenda anymore. And then the additional capacity from 2026 until 2030 is mostly coming from renewable energy. That is one thing that we are here to ensure that the future generation is having better future than current generations, and that is already coming from the vision of President Jokowi. And also from the energy sector is that today the consumption of oil is still very high, and oil is mostly coming from import. 10 years from today, the production of oil is diminishing from 700,000 barrels to only 400,000 barrels, where the consumption is going to increase. So the import is going up. So Pak Jokowi already laid another strategy in which transitioning from import fossil fuel energy to renewable energy in the transport sector using the electric vehicle is futuristic. And then on the education is like, of course, Pak Edward Ghani is already emphasizing that we're talking about the millennials here. And of course, it's becoming the future of this country depends on how the young generation is taking over all of these challenges and face it and to become opportunities. And then on the COVID-19, only a couple of days ago, the CDC, the US CDC announced that the COVID situation in Indonesia is only in level 1, is the lowest, while Malaysia and Singapore is in level 4, is high, meaning that the government under the leadership of Pak Jokowi has been doing the right thing. Tadi Mbak Hadijah is also like how pushing the brake and pushing the gas pedal has to be balanced. Each time, the government is pushing the brake, of course, the infection rate is going down, but in the same time, the economy is falling apart. So how we striking a balance, it's been proven that Indonesia government has been doing the right thing. But of course, Pak Edward Ghani already doing, announcing it's not the lesson lost, it's the lesson learned. From this, so many things we can learn. From yesterday, so many things we can learn. The presence here is bridging to the future. So Pak Jokowi already laid the vision, shifting from backward-looking to forward-looking. We're talking about the today and also tomorrow. And today, the challenge is totally different with the challenge that we faced 5 years ago. But this nation has been able to reorient itself under the leadership of Pak Jokowi so that the strategy is becoming forward-looking. And the COP26 has been a living proof that the acknowledgement is coming from the strategy presented by Pak Jokowi about the carbon neutral by 2060, a lot of strategies over there, a lot of shifting from the economy structure to become low carbon economy. But the question is this, how are we going to do this? But in the same time, it's going to be able to create more jobs, to accelerate growth and to give prosperity to the people. It's by building national capacity. So thank you so much for the question. I hope that going to satisfy the...
Thank you, Bapak Darmawan. Now we go to the next question. Now this question is to Mr. Tim Hannigan. Are you ready, Mr. Hannigan? Is the development carried out by Bapak Jokowi in the 2 periods of his leadership strong enough for the foundation of Indonesia's revival in carrying out its roles in the international arena? What are the factors that must continue to be strengthened within the Indonesian nations as a diplomatic and economic power? This is a question from Bapak Jatmiko of Presiden Psychological Consulting. Very thorough and then deep questions.
That's a really interesting question, because in a way they are 2 separate things. There's the domestic agenda and then the international agenda, and I think it's fair to say that Jokowi's main personal focus has always been domestic, and some of the criticism of his predecessor SBE was that, you know, he was very successful, loved by the international conference community, but maybe not quite so successful at home. So there's always a balance to be struck. And I think probably Jokowi himself would say that domestic would always be the first priority. And when domestic is perfect, then the other part, the international part, sort of follows on naturally. But I think that they are in a way separate things, and the focus probably always should be on domestic development. All those vital developmental areas domestically are tackled first, and then that in itself creates an international platform and an international reputation. Jokowi has always very successfully delegated to highly capable foreign ministers, highly capable sort of spokespeople for Indonesia internationally. So I think that side is very professionally handled. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how to exactly answer that question, but they are 2 separate priorities, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Hannigan. So now let's go quick to the number 3. So this question for Bapak Antonius Agus Riono. Bagaimana prediksi ke depan mengenai soft power diplomasi Bapak Jokowi dalam mempengaruhi kekuatan dunia dan menjadikan beliau seorang diplomat yang tangguh di era persaingan ekonomi dunia, bahkan menjadikannya pemimpin dunia yang segani? Dari Salomo Depi. Bapak Agus, would you please answer the question in English so that we can entertain also our participants from overseas abroad, non-Indonesian speakers? Thank you. Bapak Agus, the microphone is not active yet.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Should I respond in English or in Indonesian?
In English, please, Bapak,
Okay.
so we can gather the participants from overseas.
Yes. So it is my personal belief that soft power diplomacy is very effective means to promote Indonesian national interest. We try to avoid, if possible, hard power, but instead we have to promote soft power through diplomacy. That is number 1. So with the role of Presiden Jokowi Dodo in, for instance, COP26, his role in G20 and so on, it reflects the importance of the leadership of Bapak Jokowi Dodo in international community. So I do believe, in answering this question, I do believe that through soft diplomacy, we are able to persuade other countries in empowering the national resilience of each country. So once again, it is my personal belief that through soft power diplomacy under the presidency of the President Jokowi Dodo, we will be able to have a big role in world affairs. That is my response, Ibu Teti.
Terima kasih. Thank you so much, Bapak Agus. So now we go to the number 4 questions. Right, Bapak Edward Ghani, are you ready? Ada beberapa karakter pemilih muda. This is about young voters dalam politik, yaitu voluntarism, kolegialitas, apolitis, dan apatis, serta adiktif smartphone. Bagaimana pandangan Bapak mengenai karakter pemilih muda ini ke depannya terhadap selera mereka terhadap seorang pemimpin seperti Pak Jokowi ini dan dampaknya bagi ketahanan nasional Indonesia? So, the question is about the young voters. So, Bapak Edward, would you please address this question in English?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think I will answer it shortly. For me, in the next few years, politics in Indonesia will not be driven by ideology. So the millennials, or maybe Generation Z, or maybe the Generation Alpha, they are not very understand, or maybe take a serious note about the ideology, which is a very problematic matter in Indonesia. We are always talking about Pancasila, but the problem is the Pancasila itself is not really communicated or socialized very popularly among the young generation. And as I mentioned before in my presentation, the politics in the next few years will be based on issues. So I believe the next president, or maybe the next politicians that will come into the legislative body will have to take into account certain issues that the young voters will support, because without their support, the politics in Indonesia will not might work, right? Every decision that the government take must or needs the support from the electorates, because the political stability, as we know and as we observe in the Jokowi's era, need to be stable in order to push some kind of reform or some kind of policy. And another thing that I would like to highlight is that we are oftenly observe that there are inconsistent in implementing public policies in Indonesia. And the important thing that we must make sure is that the political leaders in the future will have a will to continue the commitments that have been initiated by the current government, because the consistent policy that we need right now. I'm happy to hear from Pak Darmawan before the government's commitment in the sustainable development, right? And I also agree with Mr. Tim before that Jokowi's focus is always on domestic issues. But in the current era, anything that is domestic at any time can become a global phenomenon, right? This is the function of social media. That is the function of the internet. So I think all of the politicians must use their ears very carefully in the digital era, because everything is politics. Everything must be have a very kind of open dialogue, must be transparent with the young voters, because they're very educated, they're very intellectual, and they use the digital very very closely, and everything that the future politician or the future presidents do in terms of the public policy, in terms of the global commitment, will be closely monitored by the young voters. I think that's short.
So along with those who forward, the questions, we will pick 30 more from the participants randomly, okay? So that will be the way how we will give these 50 books from Bapak Darmawan. So 10 questioners will receive the book that we discussed today, Jokowi and then Indonesia. So, and I will read the 10 who will get Bapak Darmawan and Mr. Tim Hannigan's book. So these are the winners. Right, so number 1, Abdullah Emir. The second, Andrew Yogianto, Valencia Pramono, Surya Nandi, Rizaini, Linda Salomo Depi, Graciela Sally Jatmiko, Daniel Colin, Lily Hana Maria, Sunarko from PLN, Dede Wijaya, and Sukarja. Right, so congratulations to the lucky participants. Our committee will privately contact each winner to explain about the giveaway giving process. As we also promised, we will pick 35 randomly from the participants to receive the book from Bapak Darmawan. Once again, congratulations. So, thank you everyone. Before I end our talk today, I would like to thank Bapak Darmawan Prasodjo once again. Mr. Tim Hannigan, thank you so much. Bapak Agus Sriyono, terima kasih Bapak, thank you so much. Mas Edward Gani Surya Hudaya, thank you so much. And for your interesting, excellent, enlightening presentation, which I believe that we are here, including me, gain enormous benefits from. So participants, let us give a big round of applause for the speakers. Right. Of course, I'm also thanking you, participants, for your attention, for your questions, for your feedbacks and comments. Thank you again for joining us today and hope we will see you next time. So I will hand this over to Odetta, our MC, to finish up the rest of the agenda for today. Odetta?
All right, thank you so much.
Now the floor is all yours.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Teti, for guiding a very wonderful session. And may we proceed to the next event. But before we close today's webinar, may I once again invite the four of our honorable speakers, Pak Agus Triyono, Pak Darmawan Prasodjo, Sir Tim Hannigan, and Pak Edward Gani, along with our moderator, Ms. Teti Lubis, together and take a picture together. We'll take a picture together. I will count to 3 and then we'll go. All right, Misters and Miss, please give us your warmest, kindest smile. In 3, 2, 1, smile. Once again, in 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you, dear honorable speakers. I wish you abundance of luck and success in years ahead. And ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end session of Discuss on 2021 SBE Webinar Series number 1, Leading the People Towards National Resilience. Diplomacy only send certificate to participants who has submitted the feedback form. So be sure that you have submitted your feedback form. And for another surprise, all participants will get free Jokowi Mewujudkan Mimpi Indonesia book for free. So all of you, if you're still here and already filled the feedback form, please stay still and please wait for the book to come to your hands. And on behalf of the committee, I would like to apologize for any unintentional wrongdoings during the webinar. And we hope this evening's webinar has shared valuable insights to all of us who are present today. And we look forward to meeting you on our next Discuss on 2021 SBE Webinar Series. And we kindly ask our participants to leave the meeting. And have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you.